Welcome back. The White House has been working overtime since President Obama's comments yesterday, trying to clean up that no strategy message. Obama Press Secretary Josh Earnest at the White House briefing moments ago.
The president was talking specifically about military options for countering ISIS in Syria. The president hasn't yet laid out a specific plan for military action in Syria. And the reason for that is simply that the Pentagon is still developing that plan, and he's still reviewing them. And it would be putting the cart before the horse to talk about what sort of congressional authorization would be required for a plan that hasn't even been put in place yet.
But if Obama were to seek authorization from Congress, would Congress back him up? I'm joined now by Congressman Adam Schiff, a member of the House Select Committee on Intelligence. Congressman, it's great to see you. Thank you very much for being here. There was certainly no support for taking up his request that he then pulled back for some kind of authorization last year, exactly at this time, against Assad over the chemical weapons use against civilians in Syria. Is Congress now prepared, because of the ISIS threat, do you think, to authorize more action against Syria, including airstrikes?
No, I don't think so, and I'm glad that the president pushed back against these rising expectations that we were going to imminently attack or have airstrikes in Syria. For the main point that I don't think the case has been made for them yet. We don't have the same infrastructure on the ground to work with. We don't have the Kurdish Peshmerga. We don't have a regime we can work with. So it's a very different situation there, and I think it makes far more sense to work to push ISIS out of Iraq, contain it in Syria until we can bring about a change politically in Syria. And there, I think, really the strategy ought to look a lot like it does in Iraq. We, working with regional allies and regional adversaries, help push Nouri al-Maliki out. And there's increasing disenchantment with Bashar al-Assad, and there may be an opportunity to telegraph to the Alawites and others that if they push him out, we're ready to work with the Sunnis, Alawites, Kurds, Christians, and try to bring about a long-term solution in Syria.
Although that hasn't worked up until now, and in the interim, the death toll has been horrendous, 200,000 people.
Well, that's very true. But the situation on the ground is changing. I think as ISIS creates more enemies in Syria, as the Syrian people lose confidence, those that have been supporting Assad lose confidence in his leadership, as Iran and even Hezbollah look at their climbing losses and the threat posed by ISIS, there may be a new consensus emerging that Assad has to go, and that would be very positive.
By the way, David Cameron raised the threat level for the UK today, but according to DHS has just put out a statement saying that the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI are unaware of any specific credible threat to the U.S. homeland from ISIL. Plainly, however, violent extremists who support ISIL have demonstrated the intent and capability to target American citizens overseas, and ISIL constitutes an active and serious threat within the region. That said, there was a supporter of ISIL or ISIS who was from Florida and traveled back and forth, ending up dying in a bombing in Syria, but re-entered the United States without our even knowing of his presence.
Well, Andrea, that's exactly right, and that points out that there is a near-term risk to us. It's not of the same magnitude that we have faced historically from al-Qaeda, but there is a near-term risk, and over time that risk is going to expand as the number of foreign fighters try to come home. But even now it's something we have to confront. At the same time, this horrible execution of the journalist, this near-term threat to the United States shouldn't compel us to take acts that don't necessarily address that threat, but do hold out the prospect of really entangling us in that war in Syria. And so I think the president has widely hit the pause button on some of the military planners that were pushing him to go forward until we can be sure that a military operation in Syria will actually be productive.
Military planners and other members of the national security team, the secretary has been very vocal.
He's been very vocal about the threat. I don't know that he's been vocal in terms of saying that the way to answer that threat is with military strikes. And part of the problem is that if we go and bomb Syria right now to try to displace ISIS, who takes over that territory? Is it al-Nusra? Are we doing this to help al-Nusra? Is it Hezbollah? Is it the Assad regime forces? There aren't good answers to those questions yet, and until there are, I think the president is right to say, let's think first.
No good options, indeed. Thank you very much. Good to see you, Congressman Adam Schiff.